fairly early on in the book, you go right to music as almost the first thing that exists the minute Mr. G thinks of inventing anything. I wonder if you discuss the talk about that for a second. And then later on, in the physical world that's created, use the liquid oceans as being a physical manifestation of the music, which is actually the first thing before there is anything.
Well, one of the difficulties I had writing the book, at least the first part of the book, which takes place in the void before the universe is created, is that usually writers describe things with metaphors, and that's a standard literary technique. But when you think about a metaphor, it always requires something, some object that you're comparing the thing to. But when you don't have any material existence, you don't have objects to compare the thing to. So you have to think of other ways to create a reality or a scene if you don't have material objects, if nothing material has been created yet. So I wanted the void that Mr. G and Aunt Penelope and Uncle Dave live in to have to be something that the reader could visualize, even though it's completely empty. So I resorted to everything I could think of, and one thing that occurred to me was to have music. Of course, music has always been associated with the divine, and this seemed to me to be a nice ornamentation of the void. Mr. G, the music is really partly the thinking of his mind, but it fills the void, and later on, intelligent life creates music as well, which is associated with the spiritual side of the intelligent beings that arise throughout the universe. So that's the role that music played for me as a writer in creating the book.
Yes. In connection with sound, we always hear of the beginning of the universe as a big bang.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't there be a sound? Do you have drums?
Well, the bang in the Big Bang doesn't really refer to a sound.
It could, though.
It could.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have drums. That's a good idea. I think that the music that I hear in the void that Mr. G hears is really melodies. I mean, there's rhythm and notes, but there could be percussion in there as well. But the music exists in the void, which is prior to the creation of the universe. In fact, Mr. G creates lots of universes, and then his aunt tells him that he should do a good job with just one of them. So the music is there almost from the beginning, and it really comes out of the mind of Mr. G. Yes?
I haven't read this book yet, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for writing Einstein's Dreams, which I haven't read for some years, but that's what got me here tonight.
Well, thank you.
And all that I know about you is that you're a physicist and a writer and a professor, etc. However, you just gave me a little insight into you, I believe, when you said, or Mr. G says, I meditated, I did meditate, I am meditating, I will meditate. And so my question is, sir, are you a meditator? And if so, what sort of meditator, and how does that inform your books, or this particular book?
Well, I meditate a little bit. I have been interested in Buddhism for some years. I make a lot of trips to Cambodia, which is a Buddhist country, and my wife has gotten very interested in Buddhism. My daughter's sitting here in the audience, and my wife is not here, but she has gotten very interested in Buddhism in recent years, and
What sort of coming?
I think it's Theravada Buddhism. But I think that Mr. G would be a meditator. He would go inward frequently, you wouldn't be able to tell from the little bit that I've read to you, that even though the Earth plays no role in the things that Mr. G creates, I mean, it's just one planet among trillions, I do try to make references to all of the major religions on Earth in the book. So there are tangential references to Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. So there are various religious references, and I do have echoes of the Old and New Testaments in the book. But of course, Buddhism is one of the references. Sure. Yeah.
There's been a number of books about Zen Buddhism and physics published recently as well. I'm wondering how if you thought at all, when thinking of cosmic comics and T-Zero by Caldino, which are fables of the early, the fables of the beginning of this, but you thought at all of doing short stories, or did you immediately gravitate toward the novel and development when you wrote this book?
No, I wasn't thinking of short stories. I wanted to have, I mean, even though it's a short book, I needed the space to create the universe. So you need more than 10,000 words to create the universe. And you need to have a sense of time passing. Even 200 pages was short to cram in 10 billion years. Yes?
There was no bang in the Big Bang. There was no sound. You know, I picture it as an explosion, but I guess in a void there can't be sound. I don't understand.
Well, you need material to transmit sound, and you need a material medium. And so there was energy in the, of course, in the beginning of the universe, but there were also places of vacuum. So you would have to be at the right place to have heard something. If you were in a place of vacuum, you wouldn't have heard anything. If we took all the air out of this room right now, you wouldn't hear me talking.
So it's the air that transmits the...
It's air here. I mean, it could be, you know, you can hear sound in the water. You need a material medium to transmit sound. You don't need a material medium to transmit light. If we took everything out of this room, and I shined a flashlight towards you, you would still see the light.
So how did the term the Big Bang sort of stick?
How the bang? Well, that was a term that was invented by a British cosmologist called Fred Hoyle, named Fred Hoyle. And he was actually making fun of it because he had another cosmology that was different from the Big Bang cosmology, in which the universe had existed forever, called the steady state cosmology. But I don't know whether this diversion into physics is appealing to everybody, but it's a good question. How about a literary question, Balance? It's a good question. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, where does your Mr. G come from?
Well, you mean within the novel?
Yeah,
Well, he's there from the first sentence in the novel. He has existed forever. Of course, the word forever assumes there's some kind of measure of time, and there was no time before Mr. G created time. So at the beginning of the book, Mr. G and his aunt and uncle live in a place that has no time or space. And then the first thing Mr. G does is create time. I don't know that that's an answer
So what
to
was
the,
before? Where does he come from?
well, I don't know. I don't know where he came from, but he's there from the beginning in the novel. Yeah. And there's some, earthly cosmologies in which the universe has always existed, like in Aristotle's cosmology, and there's some in which it's created and there was a nothingness before it. But if you ask me what physicists think about it, that will lead us in another direction. So, yeah. Yes,
Well, am I allowed to ask a question that's not literary? I don't think so.
certainly. Yeah, no.
Okay, I mean, obviously people who aren't physicists cannot wrap their minds around this concept of what, so if the universe starts, so what in the world was before?
Mhm.
And if it's expanding, what in the world is on the other side of
Right.
the edge? And if there's an edge, And so, do physicists understand this? 'Cause
Well, I can give you, it's easier to explain the second idea, and I'll give it an answer with a metaphor. If you were a two-dimensional creature, if you can imagine that, just imagine, going on a very strict diet and getting down to be a flat creature. And if you lived on the surface of a balloon, so that was your entire universe, that's everything you knew, the surface of a balloon. And someone was expanding the balloon, blowing up the balloon, or not someone, but the balloon was being expanded. You could tell that your universe was getting bigger and bigger because you could, make trips around the surface, and it would take you longer and longer to make each trip. But you wouldn't see it expanding into anything. Remember, you're two-dimensional. You would just see the fabric stretching. So if you can imagine that, then it's just one dimension higher.
Sure, I got it now.
Yes.
You start out with the conceit of an aunt and an uncle rather than Mr. G being solo.
Mhm.
I assume that comes from a place of humor, correctly if I'm mistaken. And if so, does that humor repeat itself in other areas of the book? And if I'm wrong about that, then where and why?
Mhm. Well, yes, I mean, that the aunt and uncle provide a certain comic side of the book. They're also people for Mr. G to talk to. I think the book, any book would be boring if you had only ruminations of one character. It would be like dinner with Andre with one person. I mean, I laughed a lot when I was writing the book. I mean, it's a serious book that also was funny to me, parts of it. So I hope that readers will find humor elsewhere in the book besides the part that I read to you.
Is there any kind of conventional plot?
It has two plot lines. One is the cosmic plot, the evolution of the universe, and eventually, which will happen to our universe, the stars burn out and the universe becomes dark. And that's the end of life. And that will happen in our universe, or at least that's what scientists think. That's sort of the disembodied plot. And then there are a couple of stories involved that are acted out by the intelligent life that is created. And in particular, there's a story of a young woman. I use the word woman loosely, who has an event in her life which causes her ethical anguish. and her life is followed for a while by the narrator of the book. So those are some plot elements.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
One more question? Okay. Someone who hasn't asked one yet? Maybe somebody in the back? Anybody in the back want to ask a question? We might run out of questions. Okay, I'll take one in the front. Here.
Just
Yeah,
really
sure.
simple one, but what inspired the names of the aunt and uncle?
Oh, what inspired the name for the aunt and the uncle? Well, as I said earlier, I wanted to include a lot of cultural traditions, at least obliquely, and the uncle is D-E-V-A, Deva, which refers to a minor god in Hindu and Indian thought and religious thought. So that's where that comes from. And to balance that out, I wanted someone from the West, and Penelope, of course, is the wife of Ulysses, who represents the Western tradition. So that's where those two names came from. And there are other names in the book that come from various traditions like that. Yeah.